And the other major story that we are following today, the Independent report slamming the State Department for what it called systemic failures that grossly underestimated security needs at the U.S. mission in Benghazi and elsewhere at high-threat places around the world. This, of course, the attack on 9/11 that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. Tennessee Senator Bob Corker serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and heard secret testimony from the leaders of that review board during their closed session with the committee. Today, there will be open session tomorrow. They just briefed at the State Department. In fact, that is still in progress. Senator, one of the conclusions is that there were security failures there before, during, and afterwards, but particularly before and during, that they were relying on the local militia, which was completely, grossly inadequate, the report said.
Right.
What are your conclusions following the briefing that you received from the top leaders?
Well, I had seen films, Andrea, last week of both the security cameras, but also later from drones. It was later in the evening, but the security personnel we had out front literally jumped in a truck and left as soon as they saw a crowd coming. So.
You're talking about the Libyans. Let's just be clear, not the Americans who were desperately trying to stay.
No.
Chris Stevens. These were the local hires.
These were the local hires, absolutely. Right. We have some heroes that did incredible things on behalf of our Americans who saved other Americans, but the local crew literally jumped in a pickup truck and drove off. It was dumbfounding to watch. As a matter of fact, equally dumbfounding was to see how easily people made it into the compound, and then the fact that there was just really no security. So I think this is something that obviously is going to affect how we look at all of these expeditionary efforts around the country, around the world, but certainly in an area like Benghazi that was controlled by militias, tremendous oversight, very direct discussions today in the meeting, and I'm sure that'll be the same case tomorrow in the open setting, and hopefully, not hopefully, but when Secretary Clinton comes before us also.
Well, let me ask you about that, because she has been home ill for 10 days now. The flu first, then a fall, then a concussion. And there is some concern that by the time she is prepared to meet before you, the sessions will be over. She will no longer be Secretary of State. What do you think needs to be done? I know you're going to have top leadership tomorrow, but does she need to be there for you to be satisfied?
I really think she has to come before us. I think it's imperative, and let's face it, you can't confirm a new Secretary of State unless you have a working body. I think there'll be time, and absolutely has to be time for her to come forth first before we swear in a new regime. I think it's very important for her, candidly, but also for the country and for all of us just to understand the culture within the State Department. I think this report hits very much at that, and just how we're focusing on security around the world and how we need to address it. You know, Andrea, part of it, I'll give you, just to be honest, part of it is Congress's fault. We haven't had a top-to-bottom review of the State Department since I have been here. We have not had an authorization of the State Department since I've been in the United States Senate, which that's where you go through all the policies, you go through all the staffing, you go through all the requirements. And so I would say that part of this responsibility certainly lies with Congress itself, but the vast part of it really is within the State Department. Obviously, some individuals have resigned and left, again, I think the people who prepared this report have done an outstanding job in making us aware of some of the many, many problems that exist there.
And one of them, of course, the co-leader of it is retired Admiral Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he was just briefing at the State Department. I want to play a little bit of that.
The question is not simply whether an additional number of agents would have made a difference on the night of September 11th, which is very difficult to answer, but whether a sustained and stronger staffing platform in Benghazi over the course of 2012 could have established some deterrence by giving it the continuity and experience on the ground to make it a harder target for terrorists.
Let me ask you a question about that, because they did build up a bit, but there was a constant rotating, as Admiral Mullen said, of diplomatic security officials in and out. I have a thesis here. Tell me if I'm wrong, that there was no need. This was not a consulate. In fact, it technically wasn't a consulate. It was a mission. And that the real reason why there wasn't more security and a higher profile was that they wanted a low profile, because the real reason for being in Benghazi was to have an intelligence listening post. That was the annex, the CIA outpost. Mm-hmm. Am I entirely wrong on that?
Well, we probed that and today, and one of the other presenters said the culture between both the State Department and CIA was outstanding, and they worked very well together. I don't think that was the case. They had a 40-day rotation. In other words, the people would come in, they would be there at most over a 40-day period. They never really got acclimated. They never really got trained up, and certainly that's one of the things that was pointed to today. Andrea, you may have a point. We got the sense today in testimony that really was not the reason. There wasn't lesser security there because of what was happening with the CIA in an adjacent compound. There may be different answers tomorrow, but today that was not the sense that we got.
I've got to ask you whether you agree with some of the very inflammatory things that have been said, frankly, by the former UN ambassador John Bolton on another network that the State Department has completely shot down. But he's claiming that Secretary Clinton has a case of, quote, diplomatic flu. Can you put that to rest?
No, I would never. I don't make those kind of. I make statements about things that I know. I'll give you an opinion, and that is that it is absolutely imperative that Secretary Clinton come before the United States Senate before she leaves office and before another Secretary of State comes in. I think it's imperative for all involved. I don't think you can have this kind of conflict, have this kind of report, which really is very pointed, I have to say, with lots of strong recommendations. I don't think you can be a Secretary of State who claims accountability and responsibility for this and not come before the United States Senate in an open, formal hearing. So I expect that to happen. Candidly, I have no desire whatsoever to take up another Secretary of State's hearing without that having happened first. So my sense is that.
Is it a little awkward that the next Secretary of State is likely to be your colleague, the chairman of your panel, who's been chairing these sessions, John Kerry?
I shared that with him today, and I think he got the message. I'd already shared that earlier this week when the two officials, the undersecretaries, called to say they were going to be testifying instead. I made it clear to them that that's fine, but that's not fully acceptable. In other words, there has to be another round. And the fact that this ARB just came out today, Andrea, there's a lot in it. The hearings tomorrow, I think there's going to need to be a follow-on hearing anyway, and so that's a time when Secretary Clinton hopefully will come in. She's indicated a desire to do that. I think it's incredibly important for our nation that that happen.
Senator Bob Corker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. And next.